I've selected 6 cards. The first 3 are about my reactions to this situation, this crisis. And the first one is this tornado. It feels as if we're sort of holding our breath, waiting for the tornado to strike, and we don't know where it'll strike or how it'll strike, and we don't know how long. We're under a tornado watch. So it's this card is so complicated and distraught, which is what I often feel when I begin to think about all the consequences of this for the family especially, and for generally the world. So I get into a very kind of down, depressed, immobilized state, which this card represents very well. And this one is one that is in the book that Sharon also made into a card that we call Roma the Ruminator. And that's also what happens when I begin thinking about this. I go back over visuals and audios of things that have happened in the past, and what was wrong and what's happened, and so forth and so on. You can go on and on about this. So,
and, if I might add, as the spouse, I think that some of that part worries, and worries about the grandkids.
Absolutely.
And what might happen with them, and maybe some of the sadness comes from the fact that we're not able to be with our grandkids as much, and maybe for a while. It's looking like
maybe we won't be able to for a while. So that goes round and round, just like that old-fashioned movie projector. So the things that I am and do to deal with all of this, I seem to have 3 cards that really express what I can do and what I want to do. And it's really helpful to have these visual pictures, because when I start getting entrapped in the first 3 reactions, I can think visually really about these, which are various coping mechanisms. So the first one is the manager. And I'm finding that if I make lists, which I always do under the best of circumstances, of big things and little things that I really feel like I want to accomplish, whether it's making a meal or cleaning something in the house, since we now have no house cleaner. We're in that position like many people who depend on that. And I can scratch it off the list, and then I feel as if I have some agency, some power in the situation. And this is a sort of affirming kind of interaction for me to have with my manager part. So I'm looking to my manager to help me out in this situation, and she's very good and she's kind. She doesn't bully me too much, so that is a help. The other kind of thing that seems to be helping, if I can do this maybe once a day, some small bit of thing, is a helper. And I like this card because it's not an overactive helper. It's not somebody who's got a whole big bunch of possible helpy things in the basket. It's very quiet and calm. So again, I don't want my helper to bully me and make me feel bad if I don't get as much done as I would under ordinary circumstances. She seems calm. She's tied in with the earth and the sky, and she even has a turtle friend down here. So it's a good reminder to me to be helpful to somebody as long as I can be, in a calm kind of, in the sense this is obviously a rather Native American woman, in a way that will help me feel that I've been helpful without overloading me so that I get exhausted. And the final thing is a tree. I'm not much of a meditator. I'm not much of a person who gets in touch with the more spiritual dimension of reality just by meditation and by calling up some of the traditional symbols of connection to the divine. But for me, the tree has really been that kind of symbol for me. And this tree, with its roots, its branches, the sun behind it, if I visualize a tree, it can be very healing and helpful for me, even when circumstances are great, and when they're not great, it's even more important. So the tree, and being able to visualize it and having a card that actually expresses that connection is a real help to me in this difficult time.
Great. Thank you, Lauri. And one of the things to always remember with the cards is that the meaning of them is the meaning that the person themselves gives. So whatever the card means to you or the person who's using this, that's the meaning that's there. There's not a meaning that you have to discover. So usually what I find is that in a very short period of time, so maybe even less than 5 minutes of sharing, people have shared important things about themselves.
And you share it in a way that's very unthreatening, very open and very positive, which is also a plus.
So, so I've chosen some cards, and I'm going to start as well with some of the cards that are struggling a little bit more, or that could potentially struggle. So one of the things that's happened for me is that I've had to cancel a whole lot of the workshops and trainings I've been doing in Europe, and that I felt some kind of wish to be able to help the people that I wasn't able to be with during these last few weeks where I've had the workshops canceled. So for me, the card that I've chosen is a little bit more like where I could go if it was a problem, and that would be the overburdened helper. Like that I'm trying to do things like create this video. If I do that too much, then that could be an overburdened helper. But right now it's actually, I think, a fairly healthy helping part and not really overburdened. And one of the things that I always do, I'm aware that in my own system I have a little boy who has a tendency to pick up the struggles and sorrows of the world. So I like to pay attention to little Tommy now to make sure that he doesn't pick up responsibilities that he doesn't really need to pick up right now. At the same time that he reminds me of the suffering of the world and the suffering of people who are struggling much more than we are at this time. One of the other sources right now, a very kind of concrete thing, is this is a part who's represents for me a part that's struggling with some health issues, and suddenly in the midst of all of this sheltering at home and my wish to be able to walk out in nature at springtime, I have some pain in my back that doesn't allow me to walk very much. So there's a little part of me that's feeling like it's struggling with health, and I'm quite sure that I'll make it through that, but I have to also watch out for another part of me that can come into these situations, and that's steel. Because steel is the part of me that knows no pain, knows no exhaustion, it just keeps on going. And when you have a pinched nerve in your back with some spinal issues, he really needs to keep himself in check, as Lauri knows. So he's already been overactive a few days, which set me back a little bit. So steel, you really need to chill a little bit. I know you're going to help me a lot, and you are helping me, but need to take it easy. So resources for me, partly I've noticed, this has been kind of interesting, is my more scientific part has been looking at the whole nature of the COVID-19 and trying to understand what the implications actually are from a scientific point of view, so that I can begin to plan about what is my future going to be in terms of offering trainings, when will we see the grandkids again, when as a senior citizen it's going to be safe for us to travel again, since I travel in Europe and the Middle East. So this part has a lot of work to do.
And it's helpful.
And it's very helpful. It's one of my helpful helping parts.
As long as it doesn't get too complicated and detailed and
does it sometimes get that way? Yeah,
all
it can
kinds
be.
Of details.
Yeah, she has a part of me that she calls the ferret that's always looking very deep into certain things. So the other thing that I did for this is I noticed that there's the part of me, the spiritual resource for myself, was not really, there are other cards that could represent that, but I want to invite you and myself to use a symbol that you might have that really helps you reconnect with your center. And when so Sharon Eckstein is the artist who created all these cards, but there's another artist friend who shared with me this winged heart image, which if you notice my website is wingedheart.org. And the winged heart to me is a very important resource for me to remember. The heart is the place in us that can really be compassionate, can be aware of suffering. The wings are non-attachment and equanimity. So in order for the heart to be present in the world, it needs to be present but not needing to make it different. So it's not detachment, but it's like, okay, things are as they are, and that I have an equanimity in relationship to that. Now that's easier said than done, but when this heart is in place, then, and you notice there's light flowing through it. So what I do is I like to, in fact, what I want to share with you in a minute is a way that we can use our resource cards and embody them a little more using some of the parts work methods. So in the third segment of working with the cards, I show how I help Lauri to deepen her connection to her most important resource card. And that work also leads to a little more deepening of the inner work with the parts. And we found that she was very much more in self in relationship to her parts after her deeper connection to her resource card. So often the image that people have on what we're calling here the resource card is an image that helps really to, in looking at it, one connects deeper to self and to spirit. And in this way, I think we often can see how spirituality and the parts work come together in a very natural and organic way.